Pauli Murray. She was an architect of the civil rights struggle and the women's movement. Why haven't we heard of her? The wager was $10. It was 1944, and the law students of Howard University were discussing how best to bring an end to Jim Crow. In the half-century since Plessy versus Ferguson, lawyers had been chipping away at segregation by questioning the equal part of the separate but equal doctrine, arguing that, say, a specific black school was not truly equivalent to its white counterpart. Fed up with the limited and incremental results, one student in the class proposed a radical alternative. Why not challenge the separate part instead? That student's name was Pauli Murray. Her law school peers were accustomed to being startled by her. She was the only woman among them and first in the class. But that day, they laughed out loud. Her idea was both impractical and reckless, they told her. Any challenge to Plessy would result in the Supreme Court affirming it instead. Undeterred, Murray told them they were wrong. Then, with the whole class as her witness, she made a bet with her professor, a man named Spotswood Robinson. $10, said Plessy would be overturned within 25 years. Murray was right. Plessy was overturned in a decade. And when it was, Robinson owed her a lot more than $10. In her final law school paper, Murray had formalized the idea she had hatched in class that day, arguing that segregation violated the 13th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution. Some years later, when Robinson joined with Thurgood Marshall and others to try to end Jim Crow, he remembered Murray's paper, fished it out of his files, and presented it to his colleagues that, well, in 1954 successfully argued Brown versus Board of Education. While at Howard, Murray's race ceased to be an issue, but her gender abruptly became one. Everyone else was male, all the faculty, all her classmates. On the first day, one of her professors announced to his class he didn't know why a woman would want to go to law school. A comment that both humiliated Murray and guaranteed, as she recalled, that I would become the top student. She termed this form of degradation Jane Crow and spent much of the rest of her life to end it. After earning her J.D. from Howard, Murray applied to Harvard for graduate work, only to get the Jane Crow version of the letter. You are not of the sex entitled to be admitted to Harvard Law School. Murray, outraged, wrote a memorable rejoinder. Gentlemen, I would gladly change my sex to meet your requirements, but since the way to such change has not been revealed to me, I have no recourse but to appeal to you to change your minds on this subject. Are you telling me that one is as difficult as the other? Apparently so. Neither Murray's own efforts nor FDR's intercession persuaded Harvard. She went to Berkeley instead. By the time Murray learned of her contributions, she was nearly 50, 2/3 of the way through a life as remarkable for its range as for its influence. A poet, writer, activist, labor organizer, legal theorist, and Episcopal priest, Murray palled around in her youth with Langston Hughes, James Baldwin, maintained a 23-year friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt, and helped Betty Friedan found the National Organization for Women. Along the way, she articulated the intellectual foundations of two of the most important social justice movements of the 20th century. First, when she made her argument for overturning Plessy, and later, when she co-wrote a law review article subsequently used by a rising star of the ACLU, one Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to convince the Supreme Court that Equal Protection Clause applies to women. This was Murray's lifelong fate. to be both ahead of her time and behind the scenes. Despite all this, Murray's name is not well known today, especially among white Americans. The past few years, however, have seen a burst in interest of her life and work. She's been sainted by the Episcopal Church, had a residential college named after her at Yale, and beginning in 2016, several books have been written about her, including Jane Crow, The Life of Pauli Murray. Amid all this, Murray grew up, in her own words, a thin, wiry, ravenous child, exceedingly willful yet eager to please. She taught herself to read by the age of 5, and from then on devoured both books and food indiscriminately. What have I learned by exploring the life of Pauli Murray? She used her eloquence of words to overturn the social and legal injustices found in white male-dominated institutions steeped in Jim Crow, Jane Crow laws. She built relationships with activists who wanted our nation to live up to the ideals stated in the Constitution. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly share about the life of Pauli Murray, architect of the civil rights struggle and the women's movement. May Murray's amazing life inspire us to be impractical and reckless when it comes to the Equal Protection Clause for women and men.